Hey everybody, Mike Naso here from IPR365.com with the latest on the tropics. Tropical storm Bonnie made landfall this morning very close to the Cutler Bay area in southeast Florida. It is now a depression, and when we take a look at the entire Atlantic basin as of right now, Bonnie is really the only game in town, and if it is a game, it isn't a game I'd bet on because right now it is looking very, very ragged. It's this system in here. The center has just moved off the southwest Florida coastline. It's in the Gulf of Mexico. It's headed towards the second landfall somewhere along the Gulf Coast, probably Louisiana or Mississippi, but do not rule out a track further to the north or further to the west. You can see on that loop that spinning in the Gulf of Mexico is in the upper levels, and that is an upper level low sitting right about here due south of, say, Houma, Louisiana, and that continues to move on to the west. Remember this time yesterday when I mentioned the low, it was in the Bahamas. It's moved along, and it's kind of dragged Bonnie along with it, not to mention high pressure helping out. And we appear to have another little upper feature here developing into an upper low, potentially, and that's shearing this little doodad down here in the Caribbean Sea, so we'll keep an eye on that in case that becomes an invest, but right now, probably not. The only focus is Bonnie. So let's take a look at the latest as of 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Bonnie, and that's also 4 p.m. Central Time. Bonnie was at 26.2 north, 81.9 west. Winds were down now to 35 miles an hour, gusting to 45. It's moving west-northwest at 18, so it's moving very, very fast. And the pressure's way up now at about 1,009 millibars. And of course, it made landfall near Cutler Ridge, Florida. I'm sorry, it's Cutler Bay now. It was Cutler Ridge when Andrew hit in '92, and obviously it changed names. I would want to change names after being hit by a storm like Andrew, but it's now known as Cutler Bay, Florida, and that's very close to Homestead and south of Miami Beach. And Bonnie made landfall there and has cut across the peninsula and has left a trail of a few rain showers and some gusty winds. Other than that, not much. The storm by this time tomorrow should be about to make landfall along the coastline of either Louisiana or Mississippi. Right now, it's very, very close as to where exactly it makes landfall. However, you can see the Hurricane Center's predicted track, and again, you have to take this with a grain of salt because there is a cone, and the Hurricane Center always stresses that you'll need to keep track of that cone. But you can see the exact forecast line brings the system in right near the Louisiana-Mississippi border region, very close to where Hurricane Katrina made its second landfall, say near Pearlington, Bay St. Louis, areas here near Slidell, Louisiana, on the Pearl River, and it appears as though it's going to come right on through and make landfall, but it's expected to be so weak that really you'll just have to deal with high swells, and the right side of the storm will always probably be the worst, whatever the worst is that Bonnie will do. And so if I were in Bay St. Louis, Long Beach, past Christian, trust me, you guys, as we all know, have been through a lot worse in the last several years. So right now it looks like Bonnie's going to be just a rain producer. However, the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico that's been going on in this country now for quite a long time, this could have an effect to help bring some of that oil into the coastline here, into the marshes of Louisiana and the coastlines here, so keep an eye out for that just in case that happens. But generally, a landfall in Mississippi or Louisiana, but again, it could be further north or to the south. The system's not expected to strengthen much, by the way. However, we do have those tropical storm warnings out as continues to head right towards the coastline there of the Gulf Coast. Still out for the west coast of Florida with some of those residual winds coming in behind the system. Real quick on the track, by the way, is pretty straightforward. It's going to continue off towards the west-northwest, northwest, into landfall, and then probably curve up and around. Some of the models actually bring it up in my area by then. Bonnie will likely be some rain showers, if that. So we're not going to have to deal with much of Bonnie after landfall. And even at landfall, it's not going to be much. Florida, you did get a little bit of rainfall, especially in the southeast portion of the state. You can see the visible as the center moved across the peninsula, and now it's sitting right there, right off, say, Marco Island, south of Sanibel, heading on off quickly now towards the north central Gulf Coast. Another look at the infrared satellite imagery, unenhanced. You can see the system there speeding across, and look at that upper low moving in sync, shearing Bonnie. Once again, areas of Florida are impacted by a very weak and sheared Bonnie like they were in 2004. Of course, Bonnie preceded a Category 4 hurricane named Charlie, so let's hope history doesn't repeat itself in that way. But as of right now, there's Bonnie, very ill-defined, a depression now, leaving the state of Florida. Taking a look at the latest radar as we continue to try and see exactly what the impacts from Bonnie are. You can see it's a very dry tropical cyclone. The center here, you can see the spin near Naples, as I mentioned, Marco Island, south of Fort Myers and Sanibel, generally heading very quickly in that direction. Look what it's leaving behind. Some scattered showers back towards West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Homestead. You guys, I wouldn't be surprised if some areas of the peninsula get to see some sunshine before sunset, because this system doesn't have a lot of rainfall with it and is moving away fast. But you could definitely see some rainfall still offshore. And again, it was a good bursting system, but it just couldn't burst enough with that wind shear. We've seen systems in the past like Katrina, which were able to rapidly become potent hurricanes before hitting Florida, just forming in the Bahamas. Same with Rita, which moved south of Key West, and had Rita been a day later, it actually would have become the Cat 5 it did a day sooner, and that would have been right near Key West. So we've seen systems develop close to home and get really strong, but when they get sheared by these upper lows, all bets are off to seeing it become a strong system. But again, some rainfall occurring there with our depression at this point in time. Another look at the wind shear. There's our upper low, and you can see these winds coming around. Pretty strong. Look at this. 50 knots, 40 knots, 30 knots. In fact, it's heading in the general direction of the stronger shear, but that's moving away from it. So it looks like it's just going to have to deal with somewhere between the two. So if it's got 20 knots here and 50 knots here, I'd say anywhere about 35 knots of wind shear could perhaps hit this thing before landfall, which is going to keep it a depression, but there is a chance it totally opens up into a trough, and you can even see it's definitely looking like it's almost becoming part of the upper level feature here, and that is very, very unfavorable for development. You can see that better on the tendencies. Look at our little L representing our depression in here. Look at these values. You're talking 30, 40, 50, 60 knots of shear in here, and increasing. Whenever you see these white lines, that's increasing. When you see the blue dotted lines, that's decreasing. The aqua colored dotted lines and the dark blues, that's lower shear. You can see out here in the Atlantic Basin, in the central Atlantic, we have very favorable shear. And the GFS has been hinting we could have a Cape Verde hurricane coming, which in a few weeks will be in August. Definitely by August, all the way into late September even. This season looks like it could reminisce, say, 98. In which case we had storms rolling off Africa the 3rd, 4th week of September. So don't be surprised if we're in September and we still get activity towards the end of the month and even in the Caribbean in the late season after that. So Bonnie may just be a taste of things to come, but right now it's a pretty sour taste for those who crave tropical weather, because if you need the rainfall, if it's hot down there and you want the rain, I know it's been very hot in the south, Bonnie might bring some relief, but really not all that much. But sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a good thing. Looking in the central Atlantic, there's our Caribbean feature. The upper lows forming in here. It's getting sheared, but we'll see if it could get away from that. Right now, not even an invest, so I wouldn't worry about it. Another little wave down here, but far too far to the south. Cape Verde Islands, you can see you guys are clear, but coming off Africa is a pretty good wave. We've been watching to wait and see what comes off, but they've been kind of sputtering. It's still a little bit early to get that, but we'll see what happens over the coming days. That'll do it this time for the Tropical Update. Stay tuned for the latest on Bonnie, only at IPR365.com.